and from, let's see, Upshur. I saw somebody from Upshur. So anyway, it's great to be here with you guys today. Now, before I launch into what's happening down in the People's Republic of Austin, I want to urge you to please attend the Chris Ann Hall Roots of Liberty training. I need you guys to help me inform elected officials about, thank you, about the Constitution and not only the responsibility that they have to uphold the Constitution, but the tools that our founders left us in the Constitution to actually solve some of the problems that they can't quite figure out in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to try to spend the bulk of my time today talking to you about one of those solutions that the Texas grassroots have come up with that would help Washington solve the issue, the runaway problem of a lawless president. There is ample opportunity found in the United States Constitution to do that, and all it takes are Republicans that have the courage to do the right thing. So, I want y'all to please come to the training and tell other people about Chris Ann being here. She actually will be the day before. We'll be doing training for our Smith County Sheriff's Office. She's going to be doing training for our law enforcement officers, as Sheriff Larry Smith promised during his campaign, and so we're going to be excited to have Chris Ann. And I told the manager, and I told him, I said, Chris Ann is a very exciting speaker, so you guys will not get drowsy at all in her classes. Before I get into the PowerPoint presentation, I want to tell you about First Amendment Tuesdays in Austin. For any of you who would like to come down on Tuesdays, and I'm not there every Tuesday yet, because there's not an awful lot of bills to talk to you about yet. But the First Amendment Tuesdays are held at the La Quinta on 11th Street. It's 300 East 11th Street. I know it well. I'll have to stay there because that's the hotel that is within walking distance of the Capitol. And just to tell y'all a little bit about what happens down there during the legislative session, the hotel rates have just soared. They're $70 a night higher than they were last session. It's very expensive, so I appreciate all of you all who make contributions toward my travel, because it's very expensive. My husband says that I'm the most expensive volunteer he's ever lived with. So, on First Amendment Tuesdays, here are some of the things that you can learn from us. And there are people there who are representing the Life, Liberty, and Property Tour. As you all know, Grassroots America is part of the Life, Liberty, and Property Tour. We have Texas Right to Life there, Empower Texans, Texas Eagle Forum, Texas Homeschool Coalition, Texas Values, Concerned Women of America. And so, we're there to tell you all about the upcoming bills and some of the behind-the-scenes things that happen in the legislative process. So we will talk to you about the ins and outs of the legislative process, which can be quite confounding if you don't kind of know the inside ball. How to effectively communicate with your elected officials, how to testify in a committee hearing, how to submit written testimony for a committee hearing, and what bills are and are not up for consideration. So that is every Tuesday, 9 a.m. at the La Quinta in the Lady Bird conference room at the La Quinta. So, now let's see. All right. Okay. Now, as you all know, I was appointed, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick appointed me chairman of his Grassroots Advisory Board. And I say to Dan, you hate me, don't you? Because here's what happens. All of a sudden you have new friends. Hi, Judge, how are you today? Good to see you. You have new friends who are telling you, could you tell Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick this for me? Could you ask him if he would speak to our group on August the 15th at 7 o'clock? And I went, he has paid staff that does that. That's not what I do. So I usually give the chief of staff's number out about that time. But it is an enormous responsibility. I hope that you all understand that and know that I take it very seriously. We will have, I'm guessing we'll probably sift out to have around 15 leaders from across the state. And I think there's a pretty good representation of Tea Party and grassroots conservatives that will be on that committee. We have our first meeting on Sunday at an undisclosed location. And we will be, I have a pre-meeting with the group. And because some of the group is not really aware of the do's and don'ts of Austin yet, they thought, oh, why don't we just meet at a restaurant before we meet with the Lieutenant Governor, and why don't we just start talking about state business? And I thought, well, you should have asked the chairman first, because I'm not going to let you do that. You know, and even if you think you're speaking you're having a meeting in a private room in Austin, Texas, you do not have a conversation about political strategy in a restaurant. You just don't do that. So we're going to have a pre-meeting. We're going to try to get people on the same page and get a fairly narrow focus to the advisory committee. I really would like for us to focus very much on border enforcement, on illegal immigration, what Texas can do as far as interior enforcement of the rule of law. I'd like to see us on education reform, which, by the way, would include parental choice, economic and educational liberty for all. We want to continue to stress the issue that we want the federal strings out of state government. We also want to focus on tax relief. And I'm going to get into some of those issues a little bit more with you today. And we probably are going to get to the point on the tax reform issue that we will have to have maybe a panel of people come in here to talk about it, because I've discovered in the last couple of weeks some pretty disturbing trends in property taxes that have to do with moving the burden onto homeowners and small business owners who cannot afford the lobbyist, who, by the way, Austin is kind of like Washington, D.C. on the Colorado now, because the lobbyists, you know, there was a period of time where lobbyists just came in to Austin every other year when the legislature was in session. But it's a year-round business. I mean, it's an all-time, full-time business now. And so they've moved into the Austin area. And so just as in Washington, D.C., I mean, they've set up camp there. So that's why you have people like the Life, Liberty, and Property Coalition, Grassroots America down there. And I can say to you all, I think this is our 7th anniversary. And you know, I really could have baked you guys some cupcakes today and put a candle in it. But anyway, Grassroots America this month is 7 years old. Of your wonderful support that we've been able to go from a local organization to one that has statewide credibility and in some regards notoriety, but have a seat at the table. The other thing that happened this week is we will, I had a conversation with the chairman and the vice chairman of the Tea Party caucus of the legislature. It will be Representative Alan Fletcher will be the chairman this year. It's time for the House to chair it. And then that Tea Party favorite that wears pro-life cowboy boots, Connie Burton, Senator Burton, is going to be the vice chairman. And if you don't know the story about the cowboy boots, Connie Burton took Wendy Davis's Senate seat. You know that Wendy Davis with the pink running shoes. Well, Connie wears cowboy boots that are the handmade custom cowboy boots that have Texas for life on the front of them. So anyway, we got some new boots on the floor of the Senate. Now, let's talk a couple of minutes about, I don't suppose, Bob, is there any way that you could get this on the back so that I could see it so I don't have to turn around? That would be wonderful if you could, but I won't be angry if you can. Let's talk about the Two-Thirds Rule. The first thing I want to tell you that is one of the most important things that's happened so far is that the decades-old Two-Thirds Rule has gone by the wayside. That is incredibly important because in the Texas Senate, the Two-Thirds Rule has been used by moderate Republicans to keep conservative reform legislation from passing. And they could blame the Democrats for it, and here's how that works. With the Two-Thirds Rule, that meant that 2/3 of the senators present had to agree to take up a rule for debate and a floor vote. So without approval of 21 of the 31 senators, a bill could not possibly make it through the legislative process to get to the governor's desk. It just was not going to happen. So if it's going to be a real problem, I can just turn around, Bob. So I'm sorry for getting you all off kilter there. Anyway, so what that meant was that if you had 19, as we have the last two sessions, we've had 19 Republican senators. What that meant was that those 19 Republicans had to go find 2 Democrats that would agree with them to get to take a bill up on the floor for a debate and a vote. Well, you know, that 2/3 rule was a convenient way to blame failure of conservative legislation on Democrats. So now, what happened? Well, we now have a 3/5 rule. That means you only need 19 votes to get a bill out on the floor of the state Senate and have a debate and a vote. We have 20 Republicans. We need 19 votes to get it out on the floor. We have 20 Republicans. What does that mean? Nobody has a place to hide anymore. So here's how the vote came out. 20 Republicans voted for it, 19 Republicans voted for it, and 1 Democrat, Eddie Lucio, voted for it. 9 Democrats voted against it, and 1 Republican, poor Craig Estes, he voted present. And he didn't get any very good committee chairmanships either. So what happens here is the Senate absolutely has an opportunity to take the mandate that the people gave the GOP in Texas. Do you understand that the people of Texas gave conservative Republicanism a green light to go? Just like the article I wrote for Breitbart. You're in the driver's seat, we expect you to drive. And if we don't want you driving some broken down jalopy, we want you to drive a big old V8 pickup truck and roar on down the highway with these conservative reforms, because we're about to pass the last easy exits off the road to California if we don't. So now what happens is we need the Senate to go ahead and pass these bills and simply stack them up like cordwood over on the House side. And if Joe Strauss and the moderate Republicans want to gum up the works, we know who to blame now, don't we? All right. So what this means for Texas is that there's no more excuses. There's no more excuses to not get conservative legislation out of the Texas Senate. And why has that been a problem in the past? Well, if you look at this, is just a short list of bills that have been held up in committee in the Senate and never made it to the floor during a regular session. That was pro-life bills from last session, constitutional carry gun bills, immigration, border, and interior enforcement bills, religious liberty bills, stricter spending limits, education reform, parental rights, school choice, property tax reform, and American laws for American courts, which we desperately need, got stuck in committee because we had some spineless Republicans who didn't want to take a position on what they said were controversial issues. Okay? So now they have nowhere to hide. House conservatives won some fantastic rules fights. Now, you know, we only had 19 House members vote for Scott Turner. So we still have Joe Straus. Okay? I have to tell you all, disappointed in that. Not a whole lot surprised by it, because elected officials all the time work against the will of the people. They do it all the time. And the only thing that gets their attention is firing a bunch of them at primary season, which we are getting very good at in Texas. I can tell you that the tone and the tenor of the Texas Senate is completely different, because now we have 8 freshmen senators who are Tea Party grassroots conservatives. So 8 out of the 20 are absolutely clear-eyed, excited about being there conservatives who understand why the people of Texas sent them there. And they understand the mandate, because I will remind you, and you keep reminding yourself of this, Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott did not run as moderates. They did not run to the center in the general election. They ran as reform conservatives, and the people of Texas voted for them. About 60% of the people who voted for conservative reform. It is time to get it done. So that's what the 8 freshmen are all about. And they caucus together. They don't have a formal caucus, they didn't give themselves a name and all that sort of thing. But they get together, they huddle together, and they talk about how to move legislation. Meanwhile, the old Senate lines want to know what they're talking about and what they're up to. And I can tell you from being around some of those longtime Republican senators, they are very acutely aware that the winds of change have been blowing around the state. And they are very painfully aware of the fact that they don't have Tommy Williams back there anymore. They don't have Corona there anymore, and they don't have Bob Dole there anymore. Now, Tommy Williams had the good sense to go on to another job. But the other 2 were defeated by Tea Party Republican candidates, and so and in fact, some of the more moderate senators are always talking about now about how they were Tea Party before it was cool. So we'll see about that. Anyway, back to the rules fight. House Resolution 4. You have to understand the way things work in the House is that these guys have less than 24 hours to look at rules changes that were put in front of them. So they have to do a crash course in reading through all of this, ponderous language, very difficult to read through anyway, and it's styled that way. But it contained language, House Resolution 4 contained language expanding an existing House investigatory panel to allow it to use closed meetings to attack state officers for not serving the best interest of the state agency. Okay, who are they supposed to be serving? The state agency or the people of Texas? See, this is an offshoot of what has been going on with the UT Law School and the scandals going on with the law school and the regents, because as you all probably know, we've had some House and Senate members who have used their influence to get their friends, their children, and children of their friends to pole vault over other people to get into the school. And so that's been a huge scandal down there, and there was a regent named Wallace Hall that was appointed to the UT Board of Regents by Rick Perry. Wallace Hall started asking questions. Now, he's one of those guys that took his job very seriously, and he wanted to know, why are certain things happening here? He began to question policy. And when people wouldn't answer him, he decided that he would use the Texas Open Records Law, and he, as an appointed official of the Board of Regents, would ask for documents from the UT system. Well, they didn't like that. I mean, who are you to be appointed by the governor to come up in here and start asking questions and actually try to do your job? So they tried every way they could to keep him from doing it, but Wallace Hall is one of those hard-headed people, and he absolutely, the more they told him to stop asking questions, the more questions he asked. And so, what ended up was that Joe Strauss put together this little committee to investigate Wallace Hall. And they went into impeachment proceedings against Wallace Hall to try to get him to shut up. So, and a one-time conservative, Representative Dan Flynn from next door in Van Zandt County, headed that committee up. And so it looked like it was going to be a railroad job. Well, anyway, Wallace Hall has fought back. And so during the campaign season, it came out that Joe Strauss's office actually contacted Governor Perry's office and said, this will all go away if you just tell Mr. Hall that he needs to step down and you can appoint someone else before you leave office. That didn't happen. So Wallace Hall is still there, and we hope that we have more regents that will ask questions about the people that are important about how and why the money that people pay, whether it's through taxes or whether it's through the tuition, the scandalous tuition that parents and grandparents pay to send kids to school. So this rule was actually to put these types of investigatory committees behind closed doors and give them more power to go out on witch hunts to get people to, to provide a chilling effect for people who would ask questions. So when this rule got to the floor, the conservative House members, and there were, Matt Rinaldi, Jonathan Stickland, Matt Krause, just to name a few, Matt Schaefer, they battled this. They had amendments, they questioned it, and so at the very end of it, all of the detrimental language was stripped out of it. The closed door part of it was stripped out. The state agency interest language was stripped out. And now it has been replaced with a rule that has increased transparency and interest of the people of Texas is the goal of the rule. And finally, David Simpson's Honest House Clock Rule passed. As you all know from hearing Representative Simpson through the last two sessions, he was highly annoyed at the fact that the House clock doesn't really tell the accurate time. For example, you will look at the House Journal and it will say that they were in session at X time on a certain day. Well, it could well be that you've been somebody like I have and you've done, when they had a lot of controversial issues that they needed to get done in the last few days of the session, and you'd go to the House chamber and take a picture because nobody was in the chamber. Nobody was on the floor debating anything. But yet you'd look back at the House Journal and it would say that they were actually in session that morning. And so what they did is they had a dishonest clock. Well, David Simpson, the man that he is, he believes that words mean things, and words in House Journals, official documents that the people of Texas rely on to tell them what happens in the people's house. He thought it needed to reflect the true and accurate time. So, David Simpson got his Honest House Clock Rule passed. And Matt Schaefer had a rule amendment that passed unanimously, and it requires transparency for any bill that creates a new occupational license or expands the scope of an existing license by requiring a specific label at the top of the bill. There are so many bills that go through, and there are so many gimmicks and techniques that they use to get things passed when people haven't had a chance to read them. Same thing that happens in Washington. So now at least these types of bills will be labeled as such, so it will be a red flag to those who believe we've got enough You know, we've got enough rules on business as it is, so that passed by Matt Schaefer. We also, now House members can e-file bills. They don't have to make numerous copies and take the copies down the hall to the clerk and have the bills filed. They can actually do that electronically, and isn't that a wonderful thing? On the inaugural speeches, and no, I did not go to the ball. There is something about being in a ballroom with 10,000 other people that just does not appeal to me. Do you know where I was? Of course, now I was on the inaugural committee, but I was in Huntsville talking to a group of Tea Party people from the Sam Houston Tea Party about how their state government needs to get out of their pocketbooks and needs to get out of Washington-style politics and get down to passing conservative legislation. The Life, Liberty, and Property Tour was actually in Huntsville on inaugural night. However, I am telling you that the highlights of the inaugural speeches held true to what the campaign promises were. Both Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick were very strong in their comments about the need for border security and protecting life. Those were their top priorities they talked about. Governor Abbott talked about transportation and the need to get transportation back to those basic elements of getting congestion taken care of and get away from some of the boondoggles like the trolley cars and the light rail and multimodal facilities like in downtown Tyler that nobody needs. And anybody that works for county government that hears that, I hope you caught that. And Lieutenant Governor Patrick talked about school choice, educational opportunity, and the parental freedom to choose. That's very, very important because we have so many children that are trapped in failing schools around the state of Texas. And any of you who have worked at all to try to turn education back to being actually child-centered and parent-centered knows what a difficult job that is. As I told the senator last week, I have a lot of friends in public education, and I have a lot of friends that are retired teachers, and they have left the teaching profession because the teaching profession no longer respects them. It will not allow them to do the jobs that they know how to do. Instead, it's a top-down bureaucracy that tells them what they need to do and the kind of paperwork and what they need to teach and when they need to teach it on the same day that everybody else is teaching it, and this crazy stuff like Common Core. So this is about setting parents and children free from failing schools. Another important thing is that we've actually had an electrical grid security briefing in the Capitol. Matt Schaefer is right in the middle of this. As you all know, because we had Frank Gaffney Skyped in to talk to you all about it, and I believe Russ Ramsland from Dallas came over to talk to you all about the problems with our electrical grid and how it is so, you know, we are just very much exposed to a terrorist attack on the electrical grid. So they have had briefings and warnings sent to legislators about how important it is to protect the Texas electric grid. And so the presenters that were there in our Capitol were Frank Gaffney. As you all know, he's a former Reagan advisor, Dr. Peter Pry. And you'll have seen him on Fox News. He's was with the CIA, and now he is executive director of the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security. So they are having those kinds of conversations, and I will tell you that the utility companies have been invited in so that they understand how important it is that they're at the table and that we actually get down to having specific action about how we're going to protect and harden our electric grid and other utilities in the state of Texas. And again, this is not anything that you don't already know. Our border is not secure. In fact, the guard is being drawn down from the border, and unless there is additional funding passed in the next week or so in supplemental spending bill, which Matt Schaefer, I guarantee you, is all over it. I talked to him this morning. And he has been to talk to the governor about this. And so there is a group of legislators, House and Senate members, a small group at this point that are working on what we can do to have an increased presence on the border And even some the more moderate House members are talking about forming a Texas Border Patrol. And it would be a division of DPS. Here is the problem. DPS is about 300 positions short now as it is. So we're talking about adding, because they have very, very high employment standards. And so it is critical that we get their retirement program shored up so that we attract and we keep the very best men and women to serve in state law enforcement. As you all have heard me say before last session, we had people who worked in metro police departments who were making between $20,000 and $30,000 more for a similar position than people in DPS. Then you think about the money that we waste on crazy things like the film and music marketing industry, which, by the way, in the baseline budget filed by Senator JoAnn Nelson in the Senate, it reduces the subsidies to film and music marketing down to $8 million. Disappointing to see that Governor Abbott's staff, and I hope this staffer is just speaking out of turn, thinks it should be about $90 million. And it's been, the film and music marketing subsidies combined have been about $231 million in biennium budgets before. So, you know, when people start talking about we don't have money to secure the border and we don't have money to pay DPS and get their retirement system shored up, I think that we could probably find some places where we could get that money, don't you guys? Okay. One of the most important things that Matt wanted me to, because he called me before I left home, he wanted me to emphasize with you all, is that they are working very hard to figure out how they can thwart Obama's executive amnesty. Because if we don't do something this legislative session, illegals will get driver's licenses under Obama's amnesty plan. Matt Schaefer believes that's wrong for Texas. And I agree. Because a driver's license is what? A picture ID. What do you need to be? Okay. So they are working, and in fact, we have been working with some people in other states that are doing the same thing, so we're trying to look at legislation that will help us avoid that. Now I want to hit the high points of a few other things. For example, on committee assignments. I would say, by and large, with the Senate committee assignments, the Senate committees were collapsed by 4. Dan Patrick streamlined those committees and removed 4 committees. And we only have 2 committees now that are chaired by Democrats, and they're pretty innocuous committees. I will tell you that it was, we are very happy, we being the conservatives, the people who helped those 8 senators, new senators get elected. We're very, very pleased with the dispersion of these new senators across some very important committees. Bob Hall, Senator Bob Hall, is vice chair of the new Border Security Subcommittee. Hello. And that is huge. The chairman of that committee is Senator Brian Birdwell. Senator Birdwell, of course, as you all, some of you know, was hurt in the attacks on the Pentagon during 9/11. And so Brian Birdwell is a survivor of that. He understands security. He understands the need of it. And so Brian Birdwell, I think, will make a magnificent chair. What we're trying to do to help them is to contact the U.S. Border Patrol reps that we know and find a way to get them before some of the House and Senate committees to actually testify. There is a Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee over in the House that needs to hear this, because it is populated with people who think there's no problem on the border. and that any kind of law enforcement presence on the border is simply just bad for commerce. Well, it's really bad for cartel commerce. It really is, and it should be. So we want to get U.S. Border Patrol. This will be the first time that we're aware of that anybody from U.S. Border Patrol has actually testified before a committee in the Texas Capitol. We need to have them. And these are, you have to understand, these are union reps. They're the only ones who can speak out and won't lose their jobs. And you've met some of them through video that I've sent to you all. So anyway, I'm going to do what I can to try to get them to come and to testify down there in those committee hearings. Matt Schaefer was assigned to the Urban Affairs and the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committees. Representative Brian Hughes was assigned to the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee and House Appropriations. And I talked to Representative Hughes yesterday and told him that funding, appropriate funding for border security is going to be very important to the grassroots, and that if we need to have U.S. Border Patrol come before the Appropriations Committee, we can absolutely provide that. Representative Simpson was assigned to the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee and to the Agriculture and Livestock Committee. And I won't go into the other people like Byron Cook, who's still Chairman of State Affairs. Liberals who keep legislation bottled up in committee, but I will tell you this. A number of people who ran for the State House, and they all run as conservatives. You know, Republicans all run as conservatives. I mean, the packaging is conservative. But when they get there, there's something else. Much, much less than conservative. So some of those folks who just could not bring themselves to vote for Scott Turner came up to me and said, I hope you understand what I did. I said, you better be concerned about what your constituents think about what you did. I said, now I'll be in your district talking about it. Yes, I will. But I'm going to tell you what the bottom line is going to be for all of us. You said that it would be different this session. You said that if you voted for Joe Strauss, that it was going to be different and that we would have conservative reforms come out of the House. So I will tell you that you now own the 84th legislative session. Whatever happens, if the pro-life bills don't come out, if a religious liberty gets squashed, if constitutional spending limits get squashed, school choice, everything. If it gets squashed, guess what? You get to own it. And this week I had a couple of guys from the Dallas area who came to visit with me because they want to run against some of these guys. So people are already thinking about challenges. Now we'll hit the high points a few minutes about the pro-life agenda, because I think the majority of people, not 100% of you, care very much about the issue of liberty called life. Okay? Insurance reform. There's an insurance reform bill that would change the way that abortion is covered through insurance plans, and that bill has been filed by Senator Larry Taylor, and John Smithy will handle that in the House. Closing loopholes that endanger pregnant minors, and this is the way the judicial bypass will be addressed, reforms in that. Connie Burton is going to sponsor that bill in the Senate, and Matt Krause in the House. The coerced abortion prevention bill. Representative Molly White has that. They don't yet have a Senate sponsor. Now, this is something that you all were introduced to last time that the Life, Liberty, and Property Tour was here, and that is the Do Not Resuscitate law in the state of Texas. Now the Texas Medical Association actually, you know, these boards can, even if you haven't consented to it, if you don't have a family member present there, They can actually say, you know, you've been here in the hospital, we don't think you're going to get better, and so if you're not moved, if you don't move to a different facility in 14 days, we're going to remove water and nourishment. And so that is the reason, the primary reason that Bob Dewell was defeated, because he carried that bill last time that would have made that onerous anti-life situation there with what we call death panels in the state of Texas would have made it even more onerous. So there are reforms for the advanced directives, and Senator Kelly Hancock will be carrying that in the Senate, and I'm not sure yet who will be doing that in the House, but that is worth watching. Now, the issue of property tax. I'm going to try to, you know, property tax is a very complex thing when you start looking at all the different formulas, particularly whenever you get into school finance. But I'm going to tell you just a Cliff Notes version of a couple of things in the tax code that needs to be changed. And this is going to mightily gore the oxes of some big lobbyists. So they're going to be very angry when they find out what we're doing with this. But on heavy equipment, did you know that if you have a piece of heavy equipment that is valued, the fair market value is $500,000? There's now this loophole, this provision in the law that says you can actually lease that piece of equipment and only count 1/12 of the annual lease payment as your fair market value for tax purposes. So what has happened is you have company X that needs to use a compressor in its processes. So it owned the compressor. Well, guess what? Now it sets up a subsidiary of itself, and it's now got a leasing company. So that piece of equipment is now owned by the leasing company, and you don't have to pay taxes on the fair market value of $500,000. You only get to claim, if you leased it for $12,000, you only get to value it at $1,000. That's pretty nice if you can get it, right? So do you understand what happens with those types of things? It just pushes the tax burden off on who? The homeowners, small business owners who don't get to do those sorts of things. Here's another thing. If you've got a hotel, an apartment complex, a country club, a refinery that is new, brand spanking new, and has a tremendous revenue stream, you actually can go to another county or to another state to find your equity comparison. And let me just narrow it down to a refinery. If you have a refinery that's been retooled and it can produce, say, 3 or 4 different products, okay, you would think that the market value of its equipment would be pretty high. If you compared it to a refinery or a plant who was older, antiquated equipment, and only produced one type of product, correct? Well, the newer refinery or plant can go over here and they can find even abandoned plants and can use that in their formulation to say they need that used as their fair market value. And you know why that works is because nobody has to disclose their purchase price or their selling price to anybody. So now, if you've got a plant, and there are actually examples I've got about 3 inches of documents on this that I've been reading, and there are actually examples of a plant that might be valued at $700 million. But yet it's gone out and it's decided that its fair market value should instead be about $12 million. And that's what they pay taxes on. Now, I'm all for reduced taxes for everybody, But what I'm not for is for people gaming the system. I'm not for special interest carve-outs for people who can hire the law firms, because what is happening now is that appraisal districts, a lot of these special interests don't even go through the grievance process. They just notify the appraisal district, we'll see you in court. They don't even try, they just leapfrog over to court. And so what happens is the appraisal districts then settle with them because what? Taking them to court is very, very expensive. And who pays the court cost? Because the appraisal district expenses are doled out to the different taxing entities who use their services to appraise properties and to handle the property appraisal process. So that's part of your tax bill. You're paying for the expenses of the appraisal district. So if they're in court all the time trying to get fair market value, you see what happens. So what we're doing is we're working with some senators to try to get in the law a definition from the comptroller's office on what will be used as equity. Because this all rests on the fact that the Texas Constitution requires property appraisals to be equal, to be uniform, and to be based on market value. So if you're able to go out and cherry pick, for example, Mac, if you didn't like the appraisal on your house, does the appraisal district let you go roam around the countryside looking for a house that simply has the same square footage as you, and you just put it in front, it may be falling down, but you put it in front of them and go, this is what I want to be used as the standard for my property tax bill. Homeowners are not allowed to do that. So why should big business? Again, I'm not opposed to business, but I don't think business should be able to game the system to the degree that they shove the property tax burden off on homeowners and small business owners. Because I can tell you, a lot of these companies are the ones that are always out there trying to get the school bonds passed. Do you understand me? Yeah. You hear what I'm saying? If you look at the people who are in your communities every time the children need something, they're the first ones there trying to pick your pocket. Well, you know what? If they're getting such a big break on their property taxes, I guess it doesn't matter to them either. So we need to get some sanity into the property evaluation process, and we're going to be working on that. In fact, a Democrat senator called me yesterday. That doesn't happen very often. And he said, Ms. Fleming, I think I really need to talk to you. And I said, well, okay, so what do we need to talk about? He said, well, now I want to qualify here. We're probably not going to agree on everything. I said, that's safe to say, Senator. But I said, here's where I said, so what are you wanting to zero in on? He said, somebody sent me an article from the Tone Morning Telegraph that they wrote about you last week and being appointed by Governor Patrick. He said, in there was an interesting quote from you about special interest embedded in the property tax stream. He said, that kind of piqued my interest. He said, because I got to tell you, I'm out of sorts about that too. And I said, well, Senator, here's the deal. If we can agree on something that is good for the people of Texas and run some of the special interest out of the Capitol, I think you and I can be friends. Office next week, could I take a picture with you? He said, can you imagine what people would say if I put that on my Facebook page? I said, well, I might make an exception for you, Senator, but I really don't have pictures made with Republicans. And he laughed at that. He thought that was really funny. Anyway, here's the point that I want to get to before I take some questions from you all. As conservatives, and as people of faith, we need to be very careful that we don't always look at every situation as being, it can't be changed, there's no hope, We're going over the cliff. Everything's on fire. We might as well just sit back and brace for the blaze. If I didn't believe that God cares very much about what happens to Texas and his people in Texas, I couldn't do what I do every day. Austin is not a very pleasant place for a girl that grew up on a ranch, that usually likes to be around cattle and horses more than she does people. A girl would rather be fishing than walking the halls of the Capitol. If I didn't believe that what we're doing is vitally important, and that what we are doing has every opportunity to frame the debate and shape the outcome of our state government, I could not do that. I want you to know that I don't have any particular learned gifts and talents and didn't go to school to do what I do. Anything that I do right, might as well go ahead and give that credit to the Lord, because I couldn't do this without him. But I can tell you all the screw-ups are mine. Don't blame any of the bad stuff I might do or say on him. But I'm going to caution you all. Please be careful that you don't become so bitter and so jaded that you embrace every opportunity to tell somebody what a dirty, rotten job they're doing the first time they disappoint you. I can tell you that the political process in Austin, Texas is very much, it's a balance between a dark art and a science. There are things that public officials say because they're trying to send you a message. If a lieutenant governor tells you that he doesn't have the votes in the Senate to pass constitutional carry, he's trying to tell you you've got a job to do. And I was very disappointed to see a bunch of people that I respect take after Dan Patrick as if he had sprouted horns and become Satan himself when he had a very, I would have to say, and I would probably get to say this to Dan, a pretty inartful conversation with Evan Smith with the Texas Tribune, because you could see it coming. You could see the question coming, and I could tell by Dan's body language that the answer probably wasn't going to be as accurate as he hoped. But when he responded to that, he absolutely did not have the votes for constitutional carry. How do I know that? Because I talked to the senators. There aren't the votes there in the Senate. Is it Dan Patrick's job to force senators to take a position? No. Whose job is that? Ours. So if you're concerned that your state senator may not support Second Amendment bills, or pro-life bills, or constitutional spending limits, or just pick any apple you want off of that conservative reform tree, the time is now to remind them. It's a simple thing. Pick up the phone. Call Senator L. Type's district office here in Tyler. Be respectful. Call the office in Austin. Leave a message and say, look, I know all the bills haven't been filed yet. I know we don't know yet which is going to be the best bill, but here's what I'm for. And I'm just calling to remind the senator that he's a conservative. He comes from one of the reddest counties in the state of Texas. And we want him to vote and support X. Just simply do that. Because I can tell you that the lobbyists, Moms Against Guns, People for the Status Quo, the tax and spenders, they are down there. They are down there every single day parading around the Capitol with their t-shirts on, and they've got the little kids who will be used as, you know, to put out front to go dump a box of pennies on a senator's desk and say, please, Mr. Senator, don't cut the film and music marketing industry because I might miss something that is very important to the long-term liberal educational program that my parents want me to have so that I can be a full, well-rounded Texan. Because they will absolutely have the children doing that. And frankly, it freaks most elected officials out when a little kid shows up with that kind of a story. Not all of them are as hard-hearted as some of us are and go, that kid's being used. Next. So I'm just saying, please use your voice for good. Now, there is a time and a place for what I call a shootout at the OK Corral. There's a time and a place for that. When you have done everything you can to talk to a senator or a House member, and he or she have just decided they aren't going to see the light on something that you know is right, something that is about limiting government and giving people freedom. If you know it's right, you have to call them and try to persuade them. We are in the persuasion business. When you persuade somebody, you try to help them see your point of view. And you do it one subject at a time. For heaven's sakes, don't get on the phone with a staffer and spend 20 minutes shooting them with a fire hose about everything that you know is absolutely wrong. And JoAnn said, and JoAnn said, and JoAnn said. Okay? Don't do that. One subject at a time. Call and have a conversation and say, it is very important to me that you let the senator or the representative know X. And then, you know, the really smart thing to do is to just send them a short note. Simple to do. Send them a note and tell them, reiterate what you said. Sometimes they will call you back. But the time is now to do that, because when we get into March 13th is the last day to file a bill. And I have people all over the state wanting me to come speak in March and April, and I'm telling them, nope, I have to be focused on that, because that's the point at which, once the bills are filed, it is our job to move them and to kill the bad bills. And that takes a lot of brain power, okay? And as I told somebody, a friend of mine who works only in transportation, she was trying to tell me about 500 things at one time yesterday, and I said, look, sister, I get it. What you need to do is send me the Cliff Notes version, and I will be ready to talk to people about transportation next week, but you have to understand, I have all sorts of other things in this brain, because I work on more than one topic. But what I'm saying to you all is, please don't gun down with your mouth our elected officials that have just been put in office until you give them a chance. Please give them a chance. If they look like they're going the wrong way, trust me, I call them and I go, are you sure about that statement that you made? And here's why, that's probably the wrong direction. And I'm going to have some conversations like that, but how do I have them? I don't get on Facebook and blast them. You know what? You know why I'm not on Facebook? Because I'm not part of the noise. Understand that? Because when I go to them very rarely. And when I show up, they know I have something to say. Okay? So you should do the same thing. Don't be part of the noise. But please, be respectful of them, and then when they absolutely have decided they're going to be jerks and they're going to be liberals instead of conservatives, then it's time. Then it's time to take the shootout at the OK Corral out of your, metaphorically speaking, out of your toolbox and meet them out in the middle of the street, okay? It's time to do that then. Okay, I'll take some questions now. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on. While Patty's getting ready, I want to tell you about something that we sent out yesterday, and it is the Texas Grassroots Solution, an interstate compact proposal for immigration and borders enforcement. And I want you all to go back to and remember when I spoke to you about our solution for the border and illegal immigration. I talked to you about Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution. I want you to be very familiar with that. That is the place in the Constitution that gives states an opportunity when the federal government has failed to do its job to protect we the people. States have the opportunity to enter into what is called interstate compacts. It can be on one subject, it can be on a variety of subjects. What is important about this is that we have 25 states that we can start with on this project. The 25 states to start with are the 25 states who are suing the federal government over executive amnesty. So it's not like we have to go wandering around trying to figure out if we've got any friends. We already know that we have some common ground with them. An interstate compact to solve borders insecurity and illegal immigration should be an interstate compact that gets us back to where law enforcement can enforce the rule of law. Over the last two administrations, including the Bush administration, Border Patrol's authority has been eroded. We now participate in catch and release. That's what we're doing at the state level. So what happens is if somebody is caught on a state jail felony, if the district attorney's office feels like it doesn't have enough money in its budget to keep putting these people in jail, guess what? They give them over to ICE. ICE lets them go. And then they go back across the border, they come back, and they end up many times doing more heinous crimes. So we've got to do better than that. Does anybody here believe that the GOP-controlled Congress is going to make any headway on illegal immigration, enforcing the rule of law, and securing the border? Anybody? Okay. They're passing some bills, but I will tell you this, H.R. 399 by McCall is a bad bill. So what if they end up passing something? Any bill they pass out of the Federal House and Senate and put in front of Barack Obama, if he signs that bill, it's bad for America. There's no other test. It's pretty simple. If he'll sign it, it's bad. So what do? We can't wait another, 600 and something days until he leaves office? The state should declare that they are going to assume their authority under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of the Constitution. They should get busy forming an interstate compact to assume that authority themselves. Those compacts go to Congress and must be approved by the House and Senate. Why is that important? Because we have a GOP-led House and Senate who say they want to secure the border. They need to put up or shut up. Or leave. Preferably leave. So if we have an interstate compact that goes to a GOP-controlled House and Senate, guess what? If they approve it, it doesn't go before the president. It bypasses the president. Interstate compacts are not approved by the president. And it becomes federal law. Now, our plan is now posted on the Grassroots website. There's also a 2-page cheat sheet, talking points, because I have to tell you, the 16-page white paper that we put together is quite laborious. It has case law links in it, it has Supreme Court ruling links in it, but it takes you through what we think the process would be, what it would look like at the state level. We're very clear that Texas should lead the way, and Governor Abbott should be the leader of that. Now, our compact, Ted Cruz has it, Louis Gohmert has it, Jeb Henshaw has it, Senator Cornyn has it. I'm routing it around the Capitol. Governor Abbott has it. Attorney General Paxton has it. Dan Patrick has it. We have to have Governor Abbott. I have a meeting with him very soon. I'm not going to tell you when. Somebody might try to run me off the road. I ask you to pray that I will have favor with him on this interstate compact. We have sent the interstate compact plan to Heritage. It has passed about 3 levels of Heritage, and it is on the legal desk. I am hoping, I have asked for, and I have been told that we have a huge likelihood of getting support from Heritage. That would be huge. So, that's why you need to take Chris Ann's class, so that you'll know how to do these sorts of things when I'm no longer here. And Dale Hulls is no longer here. Dale was a partner in this as well as Larry Cortness. So now I think I probably need to take questions. Yes, ma'am.
I had a member ask me to ask this question.
Okay.
When you are in meetings with these legislators, just kind of they're talking and you're talking with them, is there anywhere they can go to see what is happening, whether it's minutes or is there any kind of recording?
No.
It's not that they don't trust you. They just want to be in the know.
Well, okay, I'm glad everybody trusts me. And if anybody wants to be mentored in how to do this, there's a F-150 pickup truck pulled up out here, and there's a pad in it, and you can sign up for it, and when that horse rides, you can get in there and go with me. All right? So now, no, when a senator calls me, or if I make an appointment with a senator or House member, no ma'am. Just like when a lobbyist goes in and talks to them, that's a confidential conversation. And I, as an American citizen, as a taxpayer, and as the executive director of Grassroots America, I have every right to go do that. And I do.
Why did Governor Abbott appoint someone to the University of Texas Board of Regents that strongly supports Common Core?
I do not know, but he has definitely gotten criticized for that. I will say this, I don't know how they're going to vote on those nominations, but such nominations as that go before the nominating committee of the Texas Senate, and the Senate actually has to approve those. So I would say that if you wanted to be very, very proactive, you should look on the state website and call up the Texas Senate, who is on the nominations committee. And if I were you, I would call them and ask them to please reject that appointee. Now, I have to tell you that it takes quite a bit of courage to tell a brand new governor, I don't like your appointees, and I'm going to vote against it. But I think we probably have a couple that will. I will tell you that when that first came out, a group of us talked to some of the people on the nominations committee. I have no idea how they'll vote on those, but that was a bad choice. There are a lot of people that could have served much better than that individual.
Just to explain what I just did, in case y'all saw, Bob Brewer asked basically the same question, and I asked him if that answered it sufficiently, and he said yes. So I gave him his question back. I wasn't dodging a question. Would you please comment on the HB 892, compassionate use of low-dose THC?
If you really want me to. Okay, here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to get into granular specifics on bills yet because, as you all know, the House just got their committee assignments just a day ago, okay? So no bills have gone to any committees yet. We don't know what the text, like, for example, if you wanted to ask me about a specific Second Amendment bill today, too early to talk about what the best bill is. We will get down to that. But as far as that with the synthetic THC, what I understand is there's going to be a number of bills filed by people in both parties who are filing for legalization of marijuana, just period, all out, let's legalize it, take the money off of it, which is, ask Colorado if that's working out for them. All the way down to medicinal purposes. Some of the bills are very specific to THC oil, and only for children, and for pediatric cases and only under a doctor's care. I will tell you that I am never, ever going to be in support of wide open legalization of drugs. I don't care how liberty-minded people think they are about that. I'm not there with you. I'm old school on that. And there are plenty of reasons why. I also know that there are doctors who say that there are there's synthetic THC that will do as good a job for medicinal purposes, but I will tell you that I have the documents from the groups that are promoting the medical marijuana, medical THC, and they all are very bold that they are saying this is the first thing we want to get approved, and our end goal is to get all of it legalized for recreational purposes, no matter what. I mean, that's their end goal. So now, some people have the very best of intentions, and they're doing it to help out families who have children that are suffering, okay? So there's a variety of, and I can't see into people's hearts, so I don't know what some of the motivations are, but some of the bills are clearly, you can tell why they're motivated. So I'll just tell you that's something to watch, and you have to make up your mind whether you support that or not. But I don't believe in making law enforcement's job harder than it already is. So,
when was the Two-Thirds Rule put in place?
About 47 years ago, I think. I mean, it's been a long time. It's a decades-old rule. It's been there a long, long time. And it was ostensibly to protect the minority party so they didn't get trampled over. Well, over time, again, you know what happened with that. It was a good place to duck and hide if you didn't want to take a position on controversial bills.
Is the old truism, one letter is worth 100 phone calls, still true?
I think even more so today, because I think that, now, I will say this, there is a place to engage a legislator on Facebook and Twitter. There are a lot of people that do that. There are a lot of legislators that do that. But I still think the person-to-person interaction, a letter, a handwritten letter, or even if you don't have good handwriting, if you just want to type a short letter. But again, I can't emphasize enough. One topic at a time. One sheet of paper. Please, I'm begging you. Do it like this. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Here's why this bill won't work. Here's why this bill will, if you get down to the bill level. Don't send a letter that's multiple pages on multiple subjects. Please don't do that. Because as a person who writes papers for legislators, I've had them tell me, even when it's got the historical trends of spending and all that in it, they go, but JoAnn, it was 12 pages long. I said, yeah, it was double spaced. It wasn't War and Peace. And I did the work for you and it cost you $0. How good is that? So, you know, but so I'm just saying, try to keep it to one page, one subject. You're welcome to call them once a week. You're welcome to send a letter a week. You're welcome to do that. But please make sure that you have your facts, that they're accurate, and do not send internet rumors. Anything you send to a legislator needs to be sourced. If you're citing a source, you need to provide them the direct link to that source, okay?
What is the possibility of Texas closing the border with a Strauss Congress?
Well, with a Strauss house. I don't know, but I will tell you this, that I don't think the people of Texas are going to take it very kindly if Governor Abbott decides exactly what his plan is going to be, and Lieutenant Governor Patrick decides where he's going to be on it, and Attorney General Paxton says this is absolutely what we can do to stand up to the federal government. And by the way, we have to get beyond just filing lawsuits. I mean, lawsuits are great, but I'm going to ask you, in the 27, 28 we've had filed against the federal government, do you know how's that helped us? Has it slowed the president down at all? I don't think so. So that's why we have to go the interstate compact way. And I'm happy for anybody to show us a different solution, but I'm just saying, that is a constitutional way to get around a lawless president. So, if Joe Strauss wants to be the odd guy out, and his people on appropriations don't want to fund it, I think the people of Texas will have something to say about it.
I ask all the questions. Can Texas do this with Obama working against us?
Sure. You know what it takes? Courage. People that will stand up to the federal government and say, okay, all right, now's the time. Because I want to ask you this. Back when Sam Adams, John Adams, and John Hancock, and Benjamin Franklin, those guys were running around, and, you know, Sam was the one that was decided he was going to go. Sam was actually the one that convinced everybody else that we needed to stand up and fight. But when the British went to the doors of the colonists, and they broke down the doors, and they threw the people out of their homes, and they took their homes and everything they owned, and said, we're here on behalf of the king, and what yours is not yours, it's now the king's. See, they don't come to your door anymore with a bayonet. They don't come pull you out of your house and throw you in the middle of the street. But I will tell you this, the federal government is every single day confiscating, commandeering the people's stuff. They do it through the tax code, and then they do it just by executive fiat. All of the children and all of the illegals that came across the border are in schools. They're in medical facilities. They are getting housing. They're getting food provisions.
Cash.
King Barack is not paying for that. You are. So I ask you, what is the difference? Simply because they don't come to your door and throw you out of your house and take your house away from you? It is the same thing. So the question simply is, when will our elected officials have enough? When will they say enough is enough? And I think we are, we really, our country is already in a constitutional crisis. It's just not so apparent to everybody that it's causing pain to every person. You know, some people wouldn't know a constitutional crisis if it fell on their heads. But those of us who do understand the threat of an overreaching and an ever-growing federal presence understands that's exactly what's going on. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any hope for a resolution from the state of Texas that strongly supports Israel's right to exist and the right to defend itself however it decides?
Yes.
This is regarding the Texas electric grid system. Can Texas require that the grid be modified to withstand an EMP strike? I understand that it would not be a burden that is too heavy for state power companies and therefore the people to bear.
Yes, the state has the authority to do that, yes. Anything else?
Regarding school choice, education is not mentioned in the Constitution, so it is a state issue. What about Senator Cruz and Mike Lee's bill to allow school choice? What will keep the federal government from taking control of private schools and homeschool programs if the students use federal money?
Well, again, there are a variety of bills. There's a bill that Senator Donna Campbell has filed. I think it's Senate Bill 276, I think is what it is. Anyway, it is a taxpayer savings grant program, and just the Cliff Notes version of the way this works is that 40% of the money that you pay in property taxes for a particular child to stay in that public school. The other part of it goes with the child. So you hear what I'm saying, the tax dollars that a parent already is paying in to, for example, there are a lot of people my husband and I were one of them. I mean, we've paid and paid and paid and don't have any school-age children now, and you guys are still paying and paying and paying for schools, for public schools, but you don't have children in them. So, you know, they all think that if you take children out of the school, that the schools are going to collapse. Well, there's this thing called unit cost. And so if the child's not there needing a desk, books, lighting, heating, cooling, a teacher, bus driver, all that. I mean, you know, that's less that needs to be directed in overhead costs to that specific child. So having part of the money go out into the free market, whether it's to a charter school, whether it's to a different public school, whether it's to a private school or whatever. You know, private schools, and somebody sent a snarky note saying, we need to fix the public schools because Common Core is in parochial schools and it's in private schools and it's in public schools. Well, I got a newsflash for you. If you've got a private school that's got Common Core in it, it's the parents' fault. If you want to pay exorbitant private school tuition to have people feed your children a bunch of federal fertilizer, that would be your problem. That's not mine. And the same thing with the Catholic schools. If you are a Catholic or you have children in a Catholic school and your Catholic school is just spewing out all that federal education curriculum, you've got a problem. You need to go fix it. But don't ask me to continue to support, don't ask me to support leaving kids in failing schools where year after year after year after year, they don't learn how to read, they don't learn how to speak the King's English, they can't communicate right, they don't know how to do basic math, and tell me that that's okay. That is not okay. We are assigning those children a life of failure, and I don't care what color they are, and I don't care where they come from. Those children have a life for a reason. And we should do everything we can to set them free from failing federal schools so they can go live the life they were created to live. I mean, for heaven's sakes, if Dr. Ben Carson had not had one tough mama, a single mama, and people in a school that cared about him, he might have never done the miraculous things he did in pediatric neurosurgery. Anything else? Okay, you guys are still the best looking crowd I see all over Texas, and I love you very much.